go slow, walk hard like a rhino.
Frank, appreciate you coming in today. This is a big deal. Got to meet you at the gym, trying to get my life together, and I find someone who's helping a lot of other men get their life together, and it's a privilege to have you into the studio today. So I got to tell you guys a little bit about Frank here today that's in the Rhino studio. Frank is an awesome man that I knew, number one, could help me out, figure out how to do the best form on the set that I was trying to get some advice from. The other thing, too, is I found out that this guy is doing some awesome thing for a lot of men out there and for himself in faith and in fitness. Frank Rich is a renowned bodybuilder, successful entrepreneur, esteemed men's health coach. He's also the esteemed host of the Superhuman Life podcast, which I got to check out while I was in the gym too. Awesome podcast. Got through like 3 or 4 episodes of that. Rocking it out. Awesome podcast. Do not miss it. And he imparts valuable wisdom with a profound personal journey that involves battling addiction, depression, and anxiety for nearly 2 decades. Frank now dedicates himself to empowering men who face similar challenges through a powerful combination of faith and fitness. He assists men in reclaiming control over their lives and having positively transformed the physiques of countless individuals. Frank operates an exceptional online coaching platform. He offers comprehensive content, cutting-edge programs, and unparalleled services to men aspiring to enhance their muscularity, shed unwanted body fat, and attain their dream physique. And in addition, Frank serves as the visionary founder and CEO of Rebuilt Recovery, an innovative company that adopts a holistic approach to addiction recovery, placing emphasis on growth and personal development. Rebuilt Recovery takes pride in providing tailored fitness training for men in recovery, while also offering personalized coaching to those striving to break free from grips of porn addiction, which is what we're going to be talking about here today. So, Frank, you live in a superhuman life now. I know it's been a journey, and as you said, 2 decades worth of personal growth plus, right? It's been a lot longer than that, I know. And I want to get right into it. We're talking about porn addiction today, something that I found out that you were a foremost expert on, and I was looking forward to picking your brain about that. We're in a world now where we've got children under 12 getting complete access to easy access to pornography now. In the elementary schools, we've got even half of pastors that are statistically battling with a struggle with porn as well. What are we dealing with here? How much of an impact is porn really having on the society as a general? And we'll break it down to men. What kind of impact is porn having on men right now, Frank?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Ryan. First off, brother, thank you for having me here today. Welcome me in your home, in your studio.
Of course.
It's funny you mentioned we connected at the gym. I coach, mentor, speak into the lives of a lot of young men, and I tell any young guy that's struggling early on in life, 20s, maybe in 30s, like you don't know what you're here for. Like, what's my purpose? What's my calling? Question I get asked so many times.
Big question.
Find a gym for a young man trying to figure his life out. Trying to figure his career out, work at a gym, for many, many reasons. It's a filter for bringing people that are focused on growth into your life. Right?
Surrounded by people obviously wanting to grow.
Yeah, anybody that's, not just paying for the membership, but then is taking the next step to get in there. I think it's like 8% of people that have an active gym membership don't even go. So by stepping foot into the walls, it's like now you have a filter of people that are like dedicated to improving their lives. But you said, expert on porn addiction. And as you were saying, I was like, damn, I've actually never really called myself that, but I think I'm an expert on both sides of it.
Yeah.
I lived it. I struggled with it. I kept it a secret. I'm an expert at hiding things for 20 years of my life. And then I had a radical, series of events back in 2018, 2019 that led me to getting on the other side of it. Finding my freedom. I felt a call, started to talk about it, started to share it on a few of the platforms, started a podcast that led me into this coaching space.
Yes.
If you would have asked me 6 years ago that question, what is it doing to men? I would have told you, I don't know. I was so blinded to the impact it had on my life for a very long time that I couldn't really speak about these things. But as I started to get free, I always say for me, quitting porn was like a red pill moment. And what I mean is I think it removed a foggy lens at which I saw the world through. I, much like you shared with me before we started recording, like got introduced to it very young.
How young were you when you got introduced to that first probably page of porn?
Yeah, it was a graphic magazine I found underneath my dad's sock drawer. Probably 7 years old. Like,
quite young,
very young. Because I joked about this with my mom now. Like, I took the magazine from my dad, hid it in my brother's drawer. My brother's 4 years younger than me, so I tried to blame having it on like a 3-year-old at the time. Wasn't very wise, I guess, back then. But it's become obviously something that we're comfortable in discussing. But yeah, it was
now.
It was young, man, and I say this all the time, man. I'm grateful because of what I've had to witness with young men, what I see in society. That I was born in 1983. Because honestly, Ryan, like, I don't know if I would have been able to navigate what the youth are dealing with today. So
I
a lot
understand.
of different ways.
Right.
I'll let you kind of direct where we kind of go from here. But I think it's been weaponized. I think it is sitting at the root of many of society's problems. It's 56% of all divorces point to pornography addiction. What has the breaking up and the destruction of the nuclear family done to America, to societies, to culture, to communities? So for me, I think, what is it? I think pornography right now is smoking 50 years ago. I've gotten an opportunity to speak to parents, to speak to organizations, churches, men's groups, sometimes around internet safety, sometimes around technology. One thing I'll always try, or one slide I have in a lot of my presentations, is 2 pieces of marketing material. One was from the late 1800s. It was a Coca-Cola advertisement.
Really?
Where they had small percentage of cocaine laced into the Coca-Cola. And there was also doctor-prescribed cough drops. So like cure your cough with like a small percentage of cocaine. Obviously, we understand today, like that wouldn't be something.
That's why the houses were so clean back then.
Doctor, right?
Okay.
But then you go to like 1947, Camel cigarettes was marketed as the #1 cigarette for pregnant women. And like we hear that now, right? And it's like we could point to it, we can make a joke, could be like, oh, they're ignorant. But I think pornography is in the same category today, that we don't understand, or we're beginning to understand the societal impact, the neurological impact, the impact it has on a young man's development of his brain. For me, it's been 6 years of podcasting, speaking, discussing these things, interviewing people that are way smarter than me, like the true experts that are in the field researching it. So it hijacks the Brain Reward Center. It creates, I think, a false perception of intimacy, connection, relationship, reality. It leads to mental health issues. It can lead to erectile dysfunction. I think it's the modern day smoking, because for the longest time, if you said porn addiction, you were casted as a snake oil salesman, or just a moral religious person over here, let me do. But more and more people are beginning to understand the neurological impact it has on societies, and then just I think the cultural impact as well.
That there's a lot said right there. This is the reason I wanted to have you in today, because I find that we can look back 1947, we can laugh about the cocaine in the Coca-Cola, mom's taking the cough drops and just sparkling the house up in the apron and everything. But we're at the precipice of, as we are advancing knowledge and learning what is actually underlying a lot of the ills we're dealing with, whether it's the nuclear family unit, whether it is the children, their behavior at home and school, their interaction with their peers, intimate relationships between husbands and wives, boyfriends and girlfriends, or whatever your combination is. I find that a lot of men, and I might say men a lot during this podcast, because the people that I'm most thinking this message really needs to get to is the fathers, the husbands, the boyfriends, those who are like me and you, that have struggled in the way that we can really relate with. I find a lot of men don't understand yet that there's any problem. We have the least, nefarious of the situations where you're using pornography responsibly and agreeably with your partner, maybe to enhance the sex life. You're doing it together. Yeah. There's nobody going off and doing it on their own. It's something that's used in conjunction in a healthy, intimate relationship. That's probably best case scenario that we can think about as far as pornography use, but that's not the majority of things that happen. You mentioned this is happening in the darkness. Yeah. This is happening behind the scenes. This is happening in isolation and creating more isolation. Most men don't understand how big of a deal people that pornography addiction is, because you mention it, you might even get some laughs, or what's the big deal with pornography and whatnot? There's a very kind of, it's not even a thing. Nobody really knows the true impact of it. So what I wanted to start out with was, what are some, if you were talking to a guy right now who is, what are some of the symptoms? Let me ask you, what are some of the symptoms that you would see of a man before you even talk to him? What is kind of the avatar of a man who is steeped in a true pornography addiction? What are some of the symptoms of that?
Yeah, Ryan. And I'm not going to push back against you, but I want to
please realign these thoughts.
Maybe I'm going to push back a little bit, because I think that most people that are consuming pornography accept it, but don't think that it's acceptable. And here's what I mean by that is, you're doing it in secrecy. You're doing it in private. You're hiding it. You're deleting your history after you look at it.
Yeah.
You don't get up from the dinner table with your family and say, all right, I'm going to go rub one out, in the bathroom. That's what you go do, especially if dinner was a stressful case, which let's be honest, a lot of families, it is. Right? So I think most men know it is. They're just not willing to accept the truth. And I think it exposes a bigger issue that most men are just lying to themselves, not just in pornography, but in most areas of their life. Let's call it for what it actually is. You're fat, you're out of shape, you're not living up to your standard. You're choosing Netflix and fantasy football over time with your kids, over time with your wife, over taking your wife out, over dating your wife. You dated this woman for however many years, and then you put a ring on her finger, and then you stopped pursuing her. So I think the issue far transcends just pornography. I think pornography is maybe weakening some of these men, right? Yeah. So maybe what we have is a generation of adult men that started pursuing instant gratifying pleasure from a young age, never developed the mental resiliency, never developed the emotional regulation needed to step into the life that they've been called to as a man. So now they're addicted to porn, they're addicted to fantasy football, they're addicted to video games, they're addicted to pleasure, they're overweight 50 pounds, they're living paycheck to paycheck, their wife doesn't respect them, their kids don't respect them, and when they look in the mirror, they don't respect themselves. So now you've created a perpetual cycle. But I don't think most men that are watching porn today are proud about the behavior. That's not been my experience with men. Now, obviously, I speak to the demographic of men that are looking for help. So
they've gotten to the point where they understand what it's causing in their life.
Yeah, but
at least a baseline understanding of, this isn't helping me reach my goals or reach my vision.
Yeah. And the people that will push back to me do it on the internet. I've never had somebody
imagine that.
I've never had somebody, when I meet them in public, or I meet a lot of people and I wear what I do on literally my shirt.
Yeah. That's right.
So what is it, right?
Recovery.
And then, okay, so people are going to push back me on the internet. Okay, your life is so great that you're spending your time during the day commenting on my videos about you're excited that you're watching porn. Kudos to you. I can't help that person. That person listening to this podcast is not that person.
That's right.
Who we help, who we serve, are the people that are, I'm awakened to this. I've been lied to it about my whole life. Now, what are the proper steps to recovery? You asked the question around what are some of the side effects and symptoms. Dude, stop doing things in private. Like honestly, I could go deeper in that, but I think addressing it for the truth, I think, is actually more valuable.
That's what we want.
To the
That's
person
what we
out
want.
there.
Truth.
Like what
Capital T.
Like, you want to know the effects that porn is having on your life? Look yourself in the mirror and tell yourself, I'm going to stop lying, and then live your life in alignment and integrity with who God is calling you to be. And I don't want to come across as a moral, religious, Bible thumping person, but define God however you want to, right? That's what 12 Steps does. But there's a voice inside of you that's calling you to a higher standard than you're living right now. Porn is holding you back from that. The minute you start listening to that voice and taking action on it and not letting the weakness Porn is an emotional escape. That's it. You're running to or from a feeling. And that's it. Like, there's no logical, rational reason why a grown man should stare into a tiny screen and pleasure himself. Like, there's no rational reason for that. So once you can see that it's emotionally driven, then you're like, okay, men don't let their emotions guide their lives. So what are the steps out of it? Learning to emotionally regulate yourself so your emotions do not drive your behaviors.
Are we dealing with a lot of shame here?
Oh, for sure.
Is that the capital emotion that we are covering over or trying to deal with?
I don't even think of shame as an emotion. Shame is a state of being. Power versus Force by David Hawkins, I think, is the best book that kind of outlines this. But we have these states of consciousness, with shame being literally the lowest state of consciousness that a man can act in, right? So if I'm acting daily or multiple times a week in a behavior that is secret and private, and I'm unwilling to talk about it with the most important person in my life, that has created a layer of shame. Because shame is, I'm bad because of what I do. I'm a bad person because of the things that I do. If she knew that about me, she would be disgusted by me. That's an identity. So shame becomes our identity. Guilt, on the other hand, is like, okay, I can be an okay person, but I've done some bad things. So you've kind of detached yourself from the identity.
Right.
Shame is the minute you hold the identity based upon the things that you do through the lens of negativity. Right? Having an identity about the type of person that you are, you listed 7 of them in my bio. Entrepreneur, bodybuilder, men's coach. These are identities that I hold, but they're positively driven because I get to help and impact other people. None of those were things that I do in secrecy or privacy. That bio didn't say porn addict that doesn't talk about it. Well, because if it was in a bio, I wouldn't be able to talk about it. But the shame is the identity, and then the identity is what creates the perception of the world, which drives the actions and the behaviors that you have. So we're dealing with massive shame. That's why 50% of pastors are struggling. That's why 70% of Christian men, because there's the identity piece. And for me, Rebuilt Recovery, soon to be rebranded as the Rebuilt Man, because we don't do recovery, we do transformation. Rebuilt Recovery is built upon the premise that all successful transformation is rooted in an identity change. So the first step to real and lasting freedom is to be able to see yourself no longer as the person that struggles with the addiction. Like, step 1, you have to be able to envision a life without this behavior, which, as we said, we have a generation of men that are now in their 20s and 30s. You and I, at the beginning of that it was a part of our lives every day since we were 6, 12, 15, 20 years old.
Yes.
So our entire worldview perception is that of this is normal. So that's, for me, you didn't ask the question, but I'll give you the answer to it. One of the things that most men struggle with is being able to actually envision a life without it. Like, it's so ingrained habitually in their subconscious that it's like they just can't think of walking into a gym, seeing the yoga pants, not being triggered to go look at porn later. Right. That's their entire worldview. So we have to literally create, and then the worldview paints a narrative of, when I see this, it creates an internal feeling. Now I'm back to being an emotionally driven person. Like, my behaviors are emotionally driven. So we have to create a new identity, which creates a new worldview. And this is all work that we do, like, one-to-one with people. But I'm kind of trying to like paint, I guess, at least a picture of.
Absolutely. So in Rebuilt Recovery, I know that you have a program that is on, I believe it's School. Is it on School?
Yeah. We host it on School.
You host it on School. And for any men who are watching this just midway through, and of course we'll reiterate this at the end too, where men can go for help, is so you're talking about identity. We're talking about the core of who we see in the mirror, our self-image.
Yeah.
We are basically cementing and keeping alive by these continual dopamine behaviors. And we might jump in, I'm sure we're going to jump into a little bit of dopamine here, such a driver of these actions too. But we're looking at someone who's identified and using these behaviors to keep that person alive that you honestly might want to kill off, that you might want to defeat and get rid of in your life. So you're talking about one of the major things that you find in Rebuilt Recovery is that men need to find create and adopt and become this new identity that they set out for themselves, right?
Yeah, I mean, is the premise of the entire work that we do. I mean, I would say if there's a thesis to my understanding of recovery is like it's rooted in identity transformation. I mean, it's embedded into the logo of our company, right? The phoenix becoming a lion, phoenix spiritually, death in resurrection, lion, what men are called to. Now you embark upon this dominion in this new territory, in this new life. So yeah, our entire program, our community, and for me, it's become the number one driver because when I looked at just 12 steps, for example, right? And when we talk about recovery, like I came into this space back in 2019, like as a former health coach. I run a fitness company. Yeah. A background in sales and leadership, kind of in the corporate sector during my 20s. I had no background in recovery, but people were asking me for help. So when I started down this path of coaching, I studied everything. Okay, well, can I just point them to 12 steps? Can't they just follow this thing that's been around for 100 years? Well, step number one in the 12 steps is to raise your hand every day and say that you're an addict. I was like, why every day if I'm trying to create a new life do I want to remind myself of the old life? Okay, I don't like that. And I get a lot of pushback because people say I shit on 12 steps, or I don't know if I can cuss, but I'm sorry. You can.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I get a lot of pushback because, I've had friends that are, advocates for the program, and I support and endorse that. But if I was going to bring something new to the marketplace, I would have to create something that is different and unique. Sometimes in marketing and branding, Nike will say why they're better than Adidas, or certain company will say they're better than this because it's different. So for me, I saw something broken in that model because I do believe in the power of the subconscious mind. I think back in 1920 when Bill W. created 12 steps, we didn't understand these things. We didn't understand neuroplasticity. That was Dr. Caroline Leaf 30 years ago, right? So a lot of my understanding, the things that we do are more modern. Now, I will point at the things in 12 steps or the other older types of programs and say that worked. That's why we've made a part of what we do, community being one of them, service being another one. So there was some good there, but we're way more advanced scientifically, technology. We're also dealing with a drug that is 25 years old. The internet wasn't around in 1920 as well. So,
And even 25 years, to get that page to load took a good amount of patience.
Sometimes you were done before the image even finished.
No kidding.
But, so it's all rooted in identity transformation because with a new identity, you now have new thought patterns. New thought patterns create new behaviors create new habits create a new reality. But
and a new man.
Yes. So the identity is the new man.
So you didn't just throw 12 steps out with it. You didn't throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, we're starting something new. You integrated what was working from 12 steps, but you found just in step one, the beginning of the staircase, that we're solidifying an identity of being something that we're trying to escape from.
Yes.
So that's what you saw is that first step. Before we even get to step 2 through 12, we see that we're keeping this identity with us on a daily basis, reinforcing what it is that we're trying to escape from.
Yeah.
It's almost as we're trying to take our prison on wheels with us and just wheel it down the street. Same bars, same prison, but we're taking it with us. So you integrated some parts that work well, but you found that this identity really is at the core, and also the stumbling block maybe for some older ways of recovery, like 12 steps. Solidifying the identity.
I've seen it, and I've created what we've done here in the addiction, internet space. And, I have friends that are in the alcohol space and kind of have done the same thing. I had a gentleman on my podcast, runs Fit Recovery based out of Arizona. I believe they are. And, he was a fitness trainer running gyms, but was also an alcoholic. With his breakfast, he was, drinking an eighth of whiskey or whatever it was. And he went the path, driven guy, entrepreneur, high performer, went the path of trying to get sober through 12 steps. And he shared a story on the podcast, in his first meeting, a woman stood up. She looked like she was 105, but she was in her 50s. So for one, there was a sign that this woman's life has been really tough. Thin, frail, barely keeping it together. She got up, raspy voice. She's like, I'm sober. I've been doing it one day at a time for the last 35 years. And for him, what he saw was a vision of himself 40 years down the road, still saying it's one day at a time. You know,
That's painful.
Do men need to be aware of certain things? Absolutely. But to have your entire life predicated on, I need to avoid this thing, I'm doing it one day at a time, to me is limited. You know, I say Rebuilt Recovery.
One day at a time.
Yeah. Rebuilt Recovery is the world's first fully integrated, holistic porn addiction recovery program based off of growth-centric principles. So I've, spent 20 years trying to figure myself out, studying all the greats in personal development. The Bob Proctors, the Tony Robbins, the Think and Grow Rich,
yes.
Napoleon Hills,
Maxwell Maltz,
all of them,
self-image,
cybernetics,
yes.
all this stuff, right? So I looked at that. I said, okay, if people are using these principles to excel from personally develop themselves, well, how do we utilize that in the addiction space? I think addiction is very targeted personal growth. You got to identify a specific area of your life that you are lacking in. Addiction isn't a disease. There's nothing wrong with you other than you're incapable of not allowing your emotions, speaking directly to pornography, you're incapable of not allowing your emotions to control your behavior. That's it. You've already said it, right? There's no rational, logical reason for me to go look at a screen and watch porn. It's all emotionally driven. So
right.
Addiction is the inability to control your emotions so they don't control you. Okay, so it's not me broken, it's just I can't do something. So if I take that perspective, now I can place it into a category of personal growth. Say, okay, yes. Well, if I'm inadequate, not broken, inadequate from a skill, from a mindset, from a belief, one of those three things is going to be inefficient within me. Okay, well, I can develop these things. Okay, so
right.
Now we've taken recovery, not from a place of like, I got to hold on every day, recovery from a place of true transformation based off of these like universal growth like principles.
Right. And you mentioned all the greats that I love too. I've been into, I called myself before we started the interview here, or the conversation that we're having right now, the smartest idiot. We're accumulating every self-help book. I've read it all. What are we actually applying? Learning for learning's sake, learning for knowledge, and just to be, useful on a podcast. Like, what are we actually putting into action? One of the action steps that I did at a UPW a couple years back was amazingly powerful. Are you familiar with the Dickens method? So
probably, yeah.
It's what you mentioned earlier. We've got that your buddy in Arizona who saw that woman. He put his own mind 20 years down the road and felt the absolute hell of being the same person with the same beliefs, same actions, same behaviors 20 years down the road. Not as spry, not as young as we're still sitting here today, looking back or looking forward and seeing how much hell that is. I want anyone watching this podcast right now to take a moment to just think about these things that you're doing in private, these things that are shameful and quiet that you're doing. You're not announcing it because you don't want anyone to know. There are things that you want help from and to break free from. What's it look like? It's right now, one thing, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, these same things are going on. You haven't contacted Rebuilt Recovery. You haven't reached out for help because you've been told, hey, a man can deal with it. It's not even that big of a deal, but you know that it's ruining some aspect of you, hindering some part of you that isn't able to reach that land of milk and honey, isn't able to reach that mission that God's given you. Think about what it's going to feel like in 10, 15, 20 years. Use that pain as leverage to reach out to Rebuilt Recovery, to reach out and say, hey, this might be underlying some of my problems. Because tell me if I'm wrong, does porn not become a foundational issue that stems out into the variety of how we perform at work, how we perform with our spouse and our partner, how we interact with the kids, and how long we do, how much focus can we give to them, or even our own focused work, just in the world and in our mission? Do you find that porn ends up being a systemic issue that branches out into all areas of life? And it could be one of those things that if you kill the boss here, that you might be able to see a lot of areas of your life improve just from knocking out this one thing. Can it be that encompassing in someone's life if someone's using porn?
Oh, for sure. But what was honestly really shocking to me, like 5 years ago when I got into the coaching space, and specifically, working one-to-one and in group types environments, is the amount of highly successful men that still struggle. So yes, can it keep men back from pursuing meaningful career goals?
It's interesting you say that.
Does it impact men from a young age from creating intimate relationships? Absolutely. And a lot of the men that are, probably going to hear this are maybe stuck in that area right now. Is like they're just lost, and they don't know what they're here for, because they've been so, and it's paralyzed them so much that they don't even like leave the house. Yes, there's that percentage of men that are out there, but there's also the guy that you're sitting across from at the car dealership that you're buying your car from, you're buying your Lexus from. There's the stockbroker that's calling you to sell you the investments. I recently had an opportunity to work with, say, a top 20 position player in Major League Baseball. Like somebody else up for a Gold Glove. Didn't end up winning
high performing man
in his position, but very high performing man. Very, very high performing man. What I think it does to them is I think it robs the joy from those accomplishments, right? It's the guy that, is the 8-figure entrepreneur that's running multiple businesses, has the beautiful wife, has the kids, has everything already, but then he still every night is having to escape. What's like, and people would hear that and be like, that guy's got everything. And sometimes I had these consultations with these guys, and I'm like, what is this guy running from? Like, he's got everything.
Seemingly.
You would think, right? But there's this deeper thing that all of us need inside of us, right?
What do you think that thing is, Frank? What's that thing?
I know what it is.
Tell me. Tell us.
G.K. Chesterton, Christian philosopher, 1800s, I believe, was also, I think, like a spy in one of the wars.
Yeah.
He had a quote that said, when a man knocks on a brothel door, he's searching for God. And the book that changed my life, Ryan, back in 2018 was Surfing for God. Michael John Cusick, great counselor, coach out of Colorado, runs a ministry practice out there, wrote the book Surfing for God. So he kind of wrote the modern version. My friend Cynthia says porn addiction is an intimacy disorder. And I think some people think that intimacy that they're running to is intimate with a woman. I think it's intimacy with God. I think a man that knows who he is, what he's here for, and how God made him to serve the world would have a hard time thinking about going to porn.
So intimacy, it's an intimacy issue.
Yeah.
But not necessarily with another human being, but with that intimate, deep, abiding relationship with God. You feel like that could be something that the men are actually searching for. It might be that you might think, hey, it's a stress reliever. I'm trying to get rid of stress. Yeah. I'm trying to get rid of the kids are driving me nuts. Even the wife, everything's driving me nuts. Work, so much going on. I just need to have a moment to myself. And of course, we get that explosion of that temporary joy. Like everything could be going to hell. I get this just explosion of just meaningful, very temporary power and intimacy with myself. And I can actually feel something powerful because maybe I'm numb. Maybe all these things are happening in my life, but I'm still numb. And I can actually, for a few seconds, feel something again. But maybe it's not about any of that. Maybe it's not about the stress relief. Maybe it's not about, maybe it's the feeling of that connection with something much higher than all of this. Maybe it's something higher than the job, than the accolades and the round of applause at work and the awards and even the respect from the wife and the kids looking up to you. Maybe it's something that you're trying to look up to. That could be God that is missing from this whole equation. I'm guessing this 12 steps, was very successful. I believe it's the second step, right? Where you do recognize a higher power.
Yeah.
Something that I don't think that the rest of the steps could even be climbed without having that. Have you found You know, I haven't talked to you about this, but I bet that you agree that everyone is welcome to their own power, that we appreciate anyone who's finding the divine and powerful and meaning in life, however that ends up happening. But for me and you, I feel as though we have found and placed our focus on a particular higher power, a particular being, a God that is specific and actually cares about us and has an intimate relationship with us, and that we yearn for deepening of that relationship. And I will just tell you, as we're continuing this podcast, that I struggled with porn for almost 30 years, most of my life, because I'm 39 now. I would have got it well before I was 10 years old, 8 years old, something like that, when I found that first Playboy that sparked these just crazy feelings. But I've been searching my whole life, and I found that if it wasn't for faith, if it wasn't for me caring about understanding the mind of God, because my own mind was corrupt, my own mind wanted temporary pleasures, my own mind wanted to have a relationship with women, and I feel like if I wasn't having that, I could at least have. Because let's be honest, I've had relationships with hundreds, maybe thousands of women. Have you not? These women in our minds have had intimate, powerful relationships with all kinds of women. You think about, they talk about body count these days. My body count is Gene Simmons-esque, because it's not just about the physical intimacy. It's the spiritual, mental binding of this woman who I don't even know her situation, most likely is going through some difficult times, as a lot of porn stars and women are. But I found, getting back to the point, was that if it wasn't for me trying to understand the mind of God and his standards, because my standards were low. When I was using porn, I was meeting my standards just fine. When I'm using cannabis daily, and I'm drinking and going out, and I'm using porn regularly and daily, they're right up there with my standards. And I found that giving my life to understanding more of God's mind, that I took on his standards, that I started raising standards, because God's standards are so much higher than mine. So if it wasn't for gaining a relationship with, for me, Jesus Christ, I would not have been able to get away from porn. And I just wanted to make that clear, because I've been through different recovery programs. I've read Rational Recovery, a wonderful book. I understand the 12-step programs. All of that didn't do much for me. It was for me personally, and just to share to the people listening to you, if it wasn't for God, if it wasn't saying, God, I don't have the power to do this, I don't have the standards to be able to live up to something that gets me out of this hole, this pit that I'm in. If it wasn't for God, I could not have done it. And I say that from someone who tried everything, tried just getting away from it, tried, because I felt these spiritual matters, that if I held on to semen, that somehow it'd be more powerful. Like I could just transmute it into this chakra cleanse that could just make me super powerful. And that goes on these days. And I have tribes, and I say tribes because they're all in a tribe, a community of people that believe that there's all these different reasons for not using porn. But for me, it was because God's standard was so much higher than mine. And I had to take on that mentality to get away from this, to get out of this hell that I was in and save my marriage. And I want to get back to ask you questions, but I was losing my marriage, and porn was a big part of that, because instead of me stepping up to be the man who I needed to be for her and leading at home, I would lead myself into the darkness and just say, you know what? Screw it. Fuck it. We can cuss on this podcast. Just fuck it. I'm going to take this time to get temporary pleasure. I don't have to deal with it. I can just bring this into my life. So anyway, back to you.
Yeah, that's all powerful, man. And if I can, I want to respond.
Please
ask another question, because you said a lot of really great stuff there. I share that there was a series of kind of radical events and experiences that took place in my life. And yeah, one of them was a surrendering to my faith. I grew up in a home that was agnostic, if there was any type of a label. There was, a church family down the street, and then we weren't them. We lived differently. So my identity as a young child was that of a non-religious person. It just was something I was so detached from. But I was down this path of like personal development and growth from like 15. I was reading all these profound books. Like it all kind of came together though 20 years later through an encounter with Jesus. So, I'm Christian, grew up in a Christian world. And if, I said something, I think at the beginning that like, this issue is about truth in men's lives, right? Because people will hear this part of our conversation and be
not
like,
my truth, real truth.
Because people will hear this part of our conversation and us saying it's about knowing God or it's about Jesus or about the Bible, but then they'll also say, well, then why do so many pastors live with it? Because those pastors aren't walking in truth. Jesus said it, the truth will set you free. Yes, I had to surrender my life to Christ, but then I actually had to live in truth.
Amen.
I had to rip the Band-Aid off and be willing to expose myself, get naked in front of God, which is get naked in front of the world. Stop living in shame. The thing that I was privately and secretly doing, other people needed to know about. The pastor is continually struggling because he holds himself on a pedestal and he's not sharing it because he's concerned with the image, concerned with, I'm going to lose my ministry, all these things. Will that happen? It can.
Fear.
It can, but you know what? Better for that to happen and you walk in integrity and God actually leads you to something more meaningful in your life than you lead a congregation down a dark path, which you're doing right now. I'm not calling out any particular pastor. I'm calling out 56% of you, though. If you catch
Which is a large number.
It's more than half of them. So
yes.
You guys need to clean that up. So, I can go on and on about an issue within the church, issues and all this. I've been very intentional in the way that I speak in the marketplace so that I've rebuilt recovery.
Understood.
Because 70% of our clients identify as Christian, but that leaves 30% of all the men that I've worked with that are Muslim, are Buddhist, are agnostic, are atheists, are on their own journey. So
right.
Do I follow Christ? Absolutely. When
yes.
you follow me, are you following somebody that is following a biblical worldview? Absolutely. Is Rebuild Recovery and Reboot Your Life, our core curriculum, built on a biblical foundation? 100%. Okay. Can the men in the group get Bible study, support what they're doing? 100%. Are we going to be leaning harder into that space in the coming year? 100%. Probably developing something specifically for the church. But I also saw, as a business owner, an opportunity in the marketplace because when people see faith-based programs, it's already got this label of like, that's not going to work. So for me, there was
I get it.
Very intentional kind of positioning in the way that I market. But for me, helping a guy quit porn is amazing. Hearing from his wife, thank you for giving me my husband back, even better than that. Seeing a man that's maybe struggling,
that's real,
and stepping into a bigger purpose and maybe taking on something bigger that's going to impact the world. Beyond that, when I have a client that says, Frank, thank you, you brought me back to God, or through you, I found God, that's the ultimate call. So there's this element of this work for me that is discipleship.
Yes.
Do I right hook it sometimes? Not intentionally, but I'm doing a lot of different things. I'm ministry focused in the delivery, a lot of free stuff. But I'm also unapologetic. Like, I'm trying to actually build like a really big company. Like, we're trying to make a lot of money, impact a lot of people. In doing that, I'm figuring ways out in the marketplace of how do we position and market and kind of do particular things. But all of that is center focus. But, Jordan Peterson, who's been a massive inspiration and influence on my life from his books. I've got a chance to hear him speak now live 3 times, got a chance to meet him once. People know him as, the 12 step or the 12 rules for life guy or the work that he's now doing. But his early work before he was a professor was in addiction recovery. He's Dr. Jordan Peterson, doctor of addiction recovery. Like, that's where he got his doctorate.
Yes.
He has said that, and this is coming from one of the world's most leading experts in addiction recovery, that all recovery from addiction requires a spiritual transformation. So for you and I, that was a surrender in our life to Jesus. For other people, it's just a prescribed different meaning to life. And that can be enough for some people to lead them down this path. But if I could plant seeds in that journey for other people, it's been my experience as well. Like, when I actually surrendered it to Jesus, everything changed. One more just kind of like, not icing on the top here, but Dr. Alan Lemke wrote Dopamine Nation.
Yes, which I have out on my bookshelf.
Another world-renowned expert in this particular category. Stanford professor, researcher, wrote the #1 book on recovery. She shares a story in that book where she had a particular client that she tried everything. This is a guy that she was working active with in sex addiction therapy.
So she had all her tools on this guy.
Everything.
Everything.
She reached
the whole Batman belt.
She tried everything. She got to a point with him. She said, all I want you to do is go home tonight and pray. And I asked her on the podcast, got an opportunity to interview her a couple years ago, right after the book came out. I said, Anna, you're world-renowned expert in the science world, right? Like usually it's science versus religion. It's kind of this countering, argument of like, you got to either believe in this thing or this thing. Ask somebody, because you've, shared here your faith. She is I don't know if she calls herself a Christian, but is somebody that prays. I said, as a scientist, though, and a clinician that was working with a patient, what were you looking for him to get out of this prayer that the science wasn't solving? And she said, Frank, sometimes life is so big, problems can become so much,
right, that
the only pathway out of it is to surrender it and say, I can't do it. I can't.
Yes.
And, I'm the gung-ho, discipline, personal responsibility, motivation, tactics, mindset, all this stuff. Like, I believe the will of the human being is far beyond what most people believe to be. Like,
100%.
I think humans are capable of incredible, because I've seen it firsthand.
What we could call miracles.
But also, we're not enough. And like that's like seriously, like we can be all and not enough at the same time.
Yes.
It doesn't make sense.
No, because there's inherent mysteries and paradoxes that are involved with this faith that'll pull you out of that hell.
Yeah.
And the intellectual mind gets in the way. I was an intellectual. I studied Dr. David R. Hawkins, Tony Robbins, every kind of book.
Yeah.
I studied it all. I tried it all. I tried Eastern mysticism. I tried going up into mountains and praying.
I love all that stuff too.
Dude, I've done it all. And it was fun. And I had good times. I had good memories. But none of it, it's like it's like the spiritual buffet. I took the spiritual buffet in because I tried to use all spiritual things to get me out of hell, because hell seems pretty spiritual because it's burning up my soul. It's locking me into this prison of my own design. And I tried everything. And I want to talk to the guy that's tried everything, and I can't help. But now, I'm not trying to create a disciple. I'm not trying to proselytize. But the facts remain, as a guy who went down every path, there was just one for me personally.
What's crazy and funny to think about as we're discussing this right now is like everybody hearing this, whether you attended church 2 days ago and went on Sunday, or you've never stepped in the foot of a church, everybody knows the story of the serpent in the garden. Every human being that's probably going to hear this knows that, right?
Yeah.
There was two human beings. They were in a garden. There was a tree. There was a talking snake. Where'd the talking snake? What
a talking reptile. Who would have thunk it?
But then the fairy tale says, hey, if you eat this one thing, you'll have all this knowledge.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, there's that lie. It's literally the first lie
That's what I want.
of humanity. You and I both experienced that.
I want to be awake.
We went and got all that knowledge, but we lacked the relationship with God at the same. Like, you can have the knowledge, but the minute you try to take that knowledge and replace God, that's when you're going to end up in hell.
Because that was the lie. With all this knowledge, you don't need God.
Yeah.
You can be God.
Yeah.
You've got the knowledge. Just do these esoteric things that nobody knows about, but because you're in the club now.
Yeah.
Here's some knowledge. Use it. You empower yourself. It's in there.
Well, there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom, right? And I wear Proverbs 9:10 on my wrist.
Oh, yeah. I didn't see that till now.
Proverbs 9:10.
Awesome.
The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. Like, I had all the knowledge in the world, bro. I had all the knowledge. I'd read all the same books. I'd gone all the same seminars. I'd done all the same things. It was me for 20 years.
Narcissistic me.
It wasn't until I said, okay. But then here's why I think that this is important, because then you have a whole sector of I don't want to say sector of Christianity because that feels like it's attacking certain people. But some people that just say it's all on God and then it's nothing on me. It's like, no, there's this dance kind of like, right? It's like we have to do our part as well. Well, God, if God wanted me free, he would just take this away from me. It's like, no, you got to kind of live in truth yourself as well. So I
like to pray before all actions, but I'm going to tell you what, I do some boating. Yeah. I'm going to pray before I get on the boat, especially when I take the family. Anything can happen out there. I'll tell you what, if I pray and then go to sleep, that boat is shipwrecked. Yes. I have to steer it. I pray and then steer. That's what I do. We were talking about this earlier today about just pray it away. Just pray it away and everything's going to go away. That doesn't seem to work. And I think that it's because you are failing to work it. Yeah. You're failing to work. Because I found that God has been able to give me strength, give me clarity, give me the ability to have discernment of what path I need to go, who I need to invite into the podcast room and all that. But it's up for me to do the actions that it needs, because the faith without the works, because by the way, I want to clarify that there's nothing else work for you to do. Going back to Jesus Christ, if you accept Jesus Christ for what Jesus had done on this earth, his death and resurrection, you believe and put your life in Jesus' hands for his path and his will for you, there's nothing left to be done. That's it. There's no extra. You can't do, if you go to the feet of that cross, there's nothing extra you can do to gain the love of God, to gain the everlasting life that is promised at John 3:16. Yeah. There's nothing left to be done. You're not capable of working enough or doing enough service out in the world or feeding enough homeless children or doing all these great things. You might still get to the point where you realize this is not going to help. You simply doing the accepting of what Jesus had done is enough. And I just had to say that because there's a lot of people that think that, I've got to be the most perfect Christian in the world. If I go back to, I stumble across porn and I look at it and I use it. I've been away from it for a while, but I'm a Christian. But now I've lost my faith. Now I've lost eternal life. Now I've lost being saved. You're still a human being. I just wanted to remind people that even with taking on this godly mind and you're following Christ, you're following your God, you're following God, and you find yourself stumbling, that you haven't lost anything. You're still flesh. You're still going to have things that are going to happen. So that's the other thing too, is do you find that, I'm going to ask you about the Christian world, because 70% of men are using pornography in the Christian faith. Do you find that there's so much pressure to be perfect that if you stumble at all, it's just even harder from secular people or anyone, just because that you have, if I use porn again, I have somehow lost my salvation. I've lost my connection with God. There's so much pressure to be absolutely perfect. Or is there any kind of, is there anything to say about striving to be perfect in this journey with pornography? If you end up stumbling back on it, or you're at the beginning of that journey away from porn, that if you use it, that somehow you're back to square one. What does someone do if they have been on a recovery journey? They end up stumbling. Do they go back to square one? Do they lose all their connection with God? Is everything over if someone stumbles during this journey, especially at the beginning or at any time? Is it all over? Is it all for nothing because we fell back into a trap, or we got so much high stress into our lives that we allowed it back in? What is that? I mean, is there any kind of how should someone feel if they end up getting back into some habits that they have felt like that maybe they have completely gotten away from, and it's come back into their life?
I've seen that a lot, and
I was trying to find my footing there.
No. I was letting you, because I was formulating my response.
Sure.
As you were doing that. So, because how I was going to initially respond is different now that you continue to go, because I was extrapolating thoughts this entire time, which is good. But I think that way of thinking stems from a flawed approach and even a misaligned aim with what is the outcome of what it is we're trying to accomplish. Okay. I can't speak about, does the church set too much of a pedestal of perfection? I don't know. I've been attending church for 5 years now. 2019, 6 years.
5 years. All right. 6 years.
Yeah, 6
Wow.
years. Grace family right there in Lutz.
Fantastic church. I know, but yeah.
Craig, Hal, Daryl, the teaching staff over there. So for me, I don't feel that the message that I've received as a Christian has been one of you have to live a perfect life. So that hasn't been my experience. If anything, if I had to critique the church, I say it doesn't call men to a higher enough standard. I actually think that the message should be you are capable of way much more. Like if you looked, not calling out Grace, but I would say if you looked at the average attendance of churches on Sundays, like you kind of see some mediocrity because that's just what our world and society is. So, I think the church could probably actually do a better job of calling men to live a higher standard. I think your question stems from that I have to go an extended length of time without watching porn in order to create sobriety, right? It's like I have to reach this streak. The NoFap community believes in this whole 90 days unlock these superpowers within. So I think that whole if I fail, if I slip, if I stumble along the journey, do I end up back at the beginning or back at ground zero? I think all of that way of thinking is the problem because it's you're not trying to go 90 days. You're not trying to go 6 months.
Yeah.
Your identity can change today. Today, you can make a decision that you are no longer the person that wants, needs, or desires it. Now, the stumbling may happen, but it doesn't take you back to square one. The stumbling is you are not yet living out that new identity. As long as you constantly remind yourself what it is. But I can tell you, in 5 years of coaching, thousands of successful transformations, most men had this point where it flipped inside and they embrace this new identity, and the desire to ever want to go back is gone. So it's you don't stumble into porn when you no longer desire it. Mm-hmm. You don't stumble when you say that's no longer what I do. So neuroplasticity, does it reset all that? Does it reset? It may lengthen the time that your brain needs to neurologically reset, but if that's what you're waiting for, you're playing the wrong ballgame. So I think the identity component is so important that it negates the conversation around what happens if I slip. Pick yourself back up, figure out what mistake you made. Because that's the reality is if you stumbled back into porn after you made a commitment to no longer looking at it, you made a mistake.
What made you forget who you are?
What was it? Was there a boundary that you weren't aware of? Did a new emotion that you maybe hadn't processed and prepared for reoccur? Did life all of a sudden throw something? So there's a mistake that was made. And instead of saying, am I back at 0-1? No, you're right here where you were. When this life obstacle presents itself again to you, though, how do you not respond? Once again, all porn use, emotionally driven. So the pathway to freedom, the pathway to stumbling or not stumbling is to no longer let your emotions drive your behavior. Yes. Dr. Trish Lee, a colleague, good friend of mine, amazing work, has a new book coming out, Porn Brain or Rewire from Explicit Matter. Very deep in the science world, professor, 25 years. She gave this great analogy the first time I spoke to her of you're literally building a wood boat, that you're going to go out and canoe with. You put some wood in, you go out and you test it. Did water make it in? Boom. So there's a hole. So if you're down the pathway of recovery or of freedom, you're listening to this, you're doing it on your own, you're in a program, whatever it is. You're one of my guys who found this. If you're in the pathway to freedom and you slip, that means that there's a hole in your boat. Okay. Find the hole, fill it, and keep moving. And that's it. It's as simple as that. But the hole in my back at square one, it's just that just negates from, like I said, just the wrong lens at what it is you're trying to do.
Another thing, as we were transitioning, I think I was trying to find what I was talking when I was speaking to 70% at the church that is dealing and struggling with this issue. Is that there is some chatter online that Christians don't sin ever right now on TikTok. If you're a Christian, you just simply don't sin. I'm not sure if that's the case or not. I find that people that are Christians no longer have the desire to sin. They want to repent for sinning. They want to completely take on that standard and stick with that standard of godliness and of righteousness and of cleanliness and whatnot. And they don't want to live that life. But that's not that a Christian man at the beginning, before he's created that new identity. Because when I got, just taking it back, when I got baptized, I didn't receive the Holy Spirit that very moment, and everything went away. I actually got pulled further into darkness when I gave my life to Christ. I had things and presences and chatter going on that pulled me into heresies and different type of modalities that allowed me to commune with other types of spirits that aren't God. A lot of other things that I dabbled in, and so what I'm saying is the transformation doesn't come from calling yourself a Christian or going to church or getting baptized.
I would say most people at church probably aren't even Christians. Like, if we really want
to
dissect their lives, I don't know a sinless human being. Like,
that's what I'm saying.
There was one of them. So whatever the perception is online, like,
it's starting to grow, and I want to squash it because I just don't.
You know, I sinned 3 times during this podcast probably already, right? So, like, I'm not out here claiming to be a perfect human being.
It's
like,
okay.
I'm nowhere near it.
Like, too.
I'm an expert in a handful of areas. I do great work in a handful of areas and have massive impact on the world in one particular area.
Right.
That by no means makes me perfect.
Right.
Like I said, I blurted out a few, curse words that some people would say were sinning. Was it? I don't know.
Ain't that a damn shame?
My goal is not perfection.
No.
As a human being.
And that's what I wanted to get to.
My goal is walking in alignment with who God created me to be. And, like, did God make a mistake with me? No, but he also didn't make a perfect human being, because there was only one of those. And
Amen.
his name was Jesus Christ. So I'm not aimed at perfection. I'm aimed at alignment. And alignment is, am I doing everything within my time on this earth to bring to surface the unique skills and gifts that God had placed in me and sharing them with others? That's all I have control of, is what am I doing with, I guess what you say, my time, talents, and treasures. And that's
exactly.
It. And I'm nowhere perfect in any of that.
I just wanted that to be stressed, because there is some really toxic talk online right now. I've seen it on TikTok, guys on there 24/7 preaching the fact that, hey, if you've given your life to Christ, if you're a true Christian, you simply don't sin ever. It's just impossible. And I find that ridiculous.
Well, that's a sin in and of itself.
I thought so.
Like, so. Yeah.
I thought so. But I know, because I see him so much, someone else is seeing him. And maybe how important it is for people that are hiding right now for this process to just come out of hiding. Not that you have to go on your Facebook Live and say, hey, I'm a porn addict, but what is the important first step of someone going from complete shame and in the dark? Like, how do they get towards the light? How can they get out of this hiding space and actually reach out? I guess that's an opportunity to plug Rebuilt, and for what's the next step for me if I feel like I want to come out of this darkness. What's the first step?
Yeah. If you're so paralyzed to the point right now where it's like, I can't talk to anybody about this. Maybe you don't have the person right now. You don't have access to me, which Coach Frank Rich, you can find us anywhere. Share it with me. There's nothing that anybody could ever say through a message or on a consultation that I haven't heard. But if you're at the point you're hearing this and you are so paralyzed, grab a journal and tell the truth to yourself. Like, wow, this is the secret that I'm living, and this is the negative impact that it's having on me, and this is how it's keeping me from all of my dreams. Like, if you can't even talk to one person about it, get honest with yourself first, and then read that every day. You gave a great piece of advice, about casting it out 5 years, 10 years into the future. Like, think about now, where your life is now, where it was when you first saw porn to how much out of control has it gotten out now? Like, what's been that escalation process? What's been the desensitization? How are you involved in maybe content that you weren't back then? And then play that out over the next 5 years. And then paint a really dark hell for yourself. And I would say ask yourself an even more meaningful question is, if you were able to get this out of your life, who could you be? So who are you now?
I love that question.
Who are you now? Because of this, who can you be if you got rid of it? And just do that to yourself.
Yeah.
If you can't talk to somebody right now. I would challenge most men. You're just allowing your fear to control you. And the advice I've given this entire conversation is stop allowing your emotions to run your life.
Yes.
But this could be a first step in doing that. So grab a piece of paper. Who are you today negatively because of it? Who could you become if you got out of it? But if you want, to reach out to myself, I mean, I don't want to plug anything here, but find a
that's okay.
pastor,
You're a resource,
a brother, a mentor. We have free videos and content. We have a free trial in our community. Coach Frank Rich. If you look us up, you can find me.
Absolutely.
We're on Instagram, YouTube, Google. Rebuilt Recovery is still the website. Like I said, it's in a rebranding right now. We'll be becoming I Am or the Rebuilt Man later this year, but. The Rebuilt Man podcast, 3 episodes a week.
Fantastic.
Find us on school, SKOOL.com/reboot your life. You can join our community for free for a week and see if you like what we have. But I think those questions to yourself, and I think truth with yourself is where it starts.
How I remember when I was really truthful with myself, how freeing that is. You go, you don't even realize how much you're walking around. You talk about squats at the gym. Just you realize that you're squatting these secrets and these baggages that you've been carrying for so long with you every day.
That was the experience. The first conversation I had with Zach Zenios, February 14th, 2019. Like I remember like it happened yesterday, because it was the first time I looked another human being in the eyes and shared the struggle. And it was in that moment, the weight that came off of me changed my life. Like I, for 20 years, had carried own pressure I put on myself, right? Of this image, of this projection of who I got to be, this model of success. Frank's this bodybuilder, this business owner. Like, you can't have any struggles. Like I had so much weight. The minute I was able to say, Zach, I'm struggling, bro, and I don't know what to do. And have him understand and not judge and be like, dude, it's okay. Like, Zach was a man I respected, Marine, like served the country. He's like, dude, I've been struggling way longer than you, probably way deeper. And it was like this ease, like the pressure was like released from a valve, at least from within me. And I still had to work and I still had to figure this thing out, but it's like most of us are carrying that pressure because it's on here, it's in here, but it's underneath here. It's so hidden from all of us. Like, you expose a light into the darkness, right? Like, darkness cannot exist with light, and that light is the truth.
That's amazing. I'm so glad that you said that too, because I'm a man who believes that there is 0 people above me. There's a lot of people ahead of me. There's a ton of people ahead of me. There's not a man or woman on this earth above me. Just there's so many ahead of me. They've done the 10,000 hours. They've done the Rebuilt Recovery. They've put the work in. They've practiced. They've prayed. They've done all the things to get ahead of me. I'm going to close in that gap. And one of the things I had to do was get poured out of my life to close in that gap. And there's so many men out there that are high performers. I've got friends that are well ahead of me. Okay, I'm nowhere near where I'm going to be yet. I love that 3-letter word. It's one of my favorite words, yet, because there's so much more coming, especially now, because God's got a plan to prosper me and a plan for my life that I am now able to see by getting rid of pornography, getting rid of cannabis, which we're not talking about today. What was a huge thing in my life for 20 plus years, daily use. I mean, Dr. Dre ain't got nothing on me. And getting these things out of my life, giving my life to Christ, stepping up and leading at home. There's so many men who are out leading in the marketplace. So many that are getting awards and they're top performers out in the marketplace. You cannot be a success in life if you're home. You can't be a success out in the market if your home life's in shambles. I don't believe it. I don't care. But there's a lot of men that are friends of mine. Thank God I have access to some of these people that are so far ahead of me. But I because I do get involved with these type of conversations and I stoke these kind of things in the men's groups, or, I'm the guy who pulls up the rug on things and says, hey, I see you hiding in there. Like, don't necessarily call people out, but I like to have big conversations. Yeah. I like to talk on big topics. And I know men that are out there they have so much on their shoulders. They have multiple companies. They've got multiple children. They've got their wives. They've got all these pressures on them. And they are absolutely afraid to let anything out to let any of that baggage go, because if they do, everything could come tumbling down. I see the fear in some of my men's that are at these high level performances, multi-businesses people that simply feel, I have to hold all this in. I cannot allow another brother to bear my burden, and it kills me. Because let's say, and these are Christian men too. And it says in the scriptures that as Christians, we are not as a suggestion, but as a law, we are to bear our brother's burdens. We are called to do that for one another. And there's a reason for that. And I'm just glad that you mentioned that you had this image to maintain. You've got these businesses, you're a high performer. Like, I can't have any cracks in my foundation. I can't allow anybody to see any weakness and whatnot. But that you told us that pressure that you are holding on to, you're strong. Your image is, I'm strong. I'm a big guy who can handle all of life's got to throw at me. But the amount of pressure that you felt come off of you when you allowed another brother to bear your burden and be vulnerable in that way, I think is a powerful testament to so many high-performing men out there that have that mentality. And I'm just really glad that portion of the podcast is there, because I've got friends, I've got people in my life who I know I'm waiting on them to step into that vulnerability. And I know how powerful that they're going to feel. They think they feel powerful now, and I know they do. I can't wait to see their levity and the lightness that they're able to feel and experience that with them, and maybe shed a little tear, because it's important for me, for my men, to know that there's a brother out there who wants to bear this burden with you, that wants to make it a mission in their life and a calling from God to wait on men to say, hey, I've got an issue. I need to tell somebody about it. And you bear that burden with them. Frank, it's been amazing. We lost our B camera. That wasn't supposed to happen, but we could have ended this a few times back. There's been so much value in this conversation right here, just as I knew that there would be. I will continue to support you along this mission here. Thank you so much for coming into Rhino Studio today. And I'm just really excited for any man, woman, any human being that gets a hold of this podcast and gets to learn a little bit more from Frank Rich. Thanks, my friend.
I appreciate you, man.
Appreciate you.